In 1972, a CIA-funded experiment at Stanford Research Institute began testing something that should have been impossible. Remote viewers sitting in windowless rooms were asked to describe locations thousands of miles away that they had never seen. Against all odds, they succeeded with accuracy rates that defied statistical probability. The question that haunts physicists to this day isn't whether it happened, but how. What if the answer lies not in the realm of the supernatural, but in the deepest foundations of reality itself, where consciousness and quantum mechanics dance together in ways we're only beginning to understand? Welcome to a journey through one of science's most controversial frontiers. I'm here to guide you through an exploration that bridges the measurable and the mysterious, where Nobel Prize-winning physicists have wondered aloud whether consciousness might play a fundamental role in shaping the very fabric of existence. Tonight, we'll drift slowly through questions that challenge everything we think we know about the nature of reality. We'll examine how the observer effect in quantum mechanics might extend far beyond laboratory walls, explore theories that suggest our minds could be quantum computers operating on principles we've barely begun to grasp, and consider whether phenomena dismissed as impossible might actually be inevitable consequences of how the universe truly works. This isn't about abandoning scientific rigor for wishful thinking. Instead, it's about following the evidence wherever it leads, even when it whispers secrets that make us profoundly uncomfortable about the boundaries between observer and observed, between mind and matter, between what we call real and what we call impossible. So settle in, let your thoughts quiet, and prepare to question assumptions you may not have realized you were making. Because what we're about to explore together might just change how you see yourself, your consciousness, and your place in a universe that may be far stranger and more interconnected than we ever dared imagine. To understand how consciousness might connect to the quantum realm, we first need to appreciate just how profoundly quantum mechanics shattered our understanding of reality. When Max Planck introduced the concept of energy quanta in 1900, he unknowingly opened a door to a universe that operates on principles so counterintuitive that even its discoverers struggled to accept them. The quantum world revealed itself to be a place where particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until observed, where the simple act of measurement appears to collapse infinite possibilities into a single reality, and where distant particles remain mysteriously connected in ways that Einstein famously called spooky action at a distance. These weren't philosophical musings or mathematical curiosities. They were measurable, repeatable phenomena that forced scientists to confront the possibility that consciousness itself might play a fundamental role in determining what becomes real. Consider the famous double-slit experiment, first performed with light and later with electrons, atoms, and even complex molecules. When particles pass through two slits without being observed, they create an interference pattern that suggests each particle somehow goes through both slits simultaneously, interfering with itself like a wave. But the moment we place a detector to observe which slit the particle actually uses, the interference pattern vanishes, and the particle behaves like a classical object, choosing one path or the other. This measurement problem, as physicists call it, has puzzled the greatest minds in science for over a century. The standard interpretation suggests that the act of observation fundamentally changes the nature of reality at the quantum level. But what constitutes an observation? Is it the interaction with a measuring device, or could it be something more subtle, something related to consciousness itself? Werner Heisenberg, One of the founding fathers of quantum mechanics once wrote that what we observe is not nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning. This seemingly innocent statement carries profound implications. If the very act of questioning, of conscious observation, shapes what we discover about reality, then consciousness might not be a passive observer of the universe, but an active participant in its creation. The implications become even more intriguing when we consider that quantum effects don't simply vanish at larger scales. Through a process called quantum decoherence, the strange behaviors of quantum particles typically become undetectable in larger systems due to interactions with their environment. But what if certain biological structures could maintain quantum coherence? What if consciousness itself operates through quantum processes that we're only beginning to understand? As you listen to these ideas, take a moment to consider how they might challenge your own assumptions about the nature of reality. What would it mean if the boundary between observer and observed is far more fluid than we've been taught to believe? The journey from quantum mechanics to phenomena like remote viewing might seem like a leap into fantasy, but the path is more scientifically grounded than many realize. In the 1970s and 1980s, legitimate research institutions began seriously investigating what they termed anomalous cognition, the apparent ability of some individuals to acquire information about distant locations, objects, or events through means that couldn't be explained by conventional sensory channels. The Stanford Research Institute experiments, funded by the CIA and later the Defense Intelligence Agency, weren't conducted by fringe researchers or enthusiastic amateurs. They were led by physicists like Harold Puthoff and Russell Targ, who approached the phenomenon with the same methodological rigor they applied to laser physics and quantum mechanics. Their subjects, known as remote viewers, consistently described target locations with accuracy rates that statistical analysis showed could not be attributed to chance. One of the most compelling cases involved a remote viewer named Pat Price, who was asked to describe a Soviet installation based only on geographical coordinates. His detailed sketches and descriptions later proved remarkably accurate when compared to satellite imagery that became available years later. The viewer had somehow perceived architectural details, equipment layouts, and operational procedures of a facility he had never seen and couldn't have known about through conventional means. These results weren't isolated incidents. Over 2 decades of research involving hundreds of trials and multiple independent laboratories consistently produced evidence that some form of non-local information transfer was occurring. The effect was small but statistically significant, leading even skeptical researchers to acknowledge that something anomalous was happening, even if they couldn't explain how. But here's where quantum mechanics enters the picture in a way that transforms this from paranormal speculation into a potentially legitimate scientific puzzle. If consciousness operates through quantum processes, as some theories suggest, then phenomena like remote viewing might not violate the laws of physics, but rather reveal aspects of those laws that we haven't fully understood. Quantum entanglement demonstrates that particles can remain correlated across vast distances, with changes to one particle instantaneously affecting its entangled partner regardless of the space between them. This spooky action at a distance operates outside the normal constraints of space-time, suggesting that information can be shared through channels that transcend our everyday experience of locality and temporal sequence. Some interpretations suggest that if consciousness involves quantum processes, it might naturally have access to this same non-local realm. The same mathematical frameworks that describe quantum entanglement might also describe how awareness could transcend the apparent boundaries of individual minds and access information from distant locations or even different points in time. The idea that consciousness might operate through quantum processes remained largely speculative until the 1990s, when an unlikely collaboration between a mathematician and an anesthesiologist proposed a specific mechanism by which quantum effects could influence the brain. Roger Penrose, a renowned physicist and mathematician at Oxford, joined forces with Stuart Hameroff, an anesthesiologist at the University of Arizona, to develop what they called orchestrated objective reduction, or ORC-R theory. Their hypothesis centers on microtubules, tiny cylindrical structures found within neurons that had previously been thought to serve mainly as cellular scaffolding. Penrose and Hameroff proposed that these microtubules might function as biological quantum computers capable of maintaining quantum coherence even in the warm, wet environment of the brain. The theory suggests that consciousness arises from quantum computations occurring within networks of microtubules throughout the brain. These quantum processes would allow for the kind of non-local correlations and instantaneous information processing that might explain not only the nature of consciousness itself, but also phenomena like intuition, creativity, and yes, potentially even remote viewing. Initially, the ORC-R theory was met with skepticism from both neuroscientists and physicists. Critics argued that the brain was too warm and noisy an environment to sustain the delicate quantum states required for the theory to work. Quantum coherence, they pointed out, typically requires extremely low temperatures and isolated conditions far from the bustling biological environment of neural tissue. However, recent research has begun to challenge these assumptions. Studies have discovered quantum effects in biological systems that were previously thought impossible, from quantum coherence in photosynthesis to quantum tunneling in enzyme reactions. These findings suggest that life might have evolved sophisticated mechanisms for harnessing quantum effects, even in warm, complex environments. More intriguingly, researchers have found evidence for quantum processes in microtubules themselves. Studies using advanced imaging techniques have detected quantum coherence in microtubule structures at room temperature, suggesting that these biological components might indeed be capable of supporting the kind of quantum computations that Penrose and Hameroff proposed. If the ORC-R theory proves correct, it would mean that consciousness doesn't emerge from purely classical neural networks, but from quantum processes that operate according to the same strange rules that govern particle entanglement and non-locality. This would provide a potential bridge between the quantum realm and phenomena like remote viewing, offering a scientific framework for understanding how consciousness might access information beyond the normal constraints of space and time. Take a breath here and imagine what this could mean for you. If your consciousness operates through quantum processes, what might that suggest about the true nature of your awareness, your intuition, your sense of connection to the world around you? The relationship between consciousness and quantum mechanics becomes even more fascinating when we consider the role of observation in quantum experiments. The standard interpretation of quantum mechanics suggests that the act of measurement causes quantum systems to transition from superposition states, where multiple possibilities exist simultaneously, to definite outcomes where only one possibility becomes real. But what exactly constitutes a measurement? In laboratory settings, we typically use electronic detectors, photographic plates, or other instruments to record quantum events. These devices interact with quantum systems in ways that destroy superposition and force particles to choose definite states. However, some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that conscious observation might play a more fundamental role than previously thought. This possibility becomes particularly intriguing when we consider experiments where human consciousness appears to influence quantum systems directly. While these studies remain controversial and require replication, some research has suggested that focused attention from human observers might affect the behavior of quantum random number generators or the patterns produced in double-slit experiments. One such study, conducted by researchers at Princeton University's Engineering Anomalies Research Laboratory, examined whether human intention could influence the output of quantum random event generators. Over nearly 3 decades of research, involving millions of experimental trials, they found small but statistically significant deviations from randomness when human operators focused their intention on influencing the devices. Similarly, some experiments have investigated whether meditators or individuals trained in focused attention techniques show different effects on quantum systems compared to control groups. While the results remain preliminary and controversial, they suggest the possibility that consciousness might interact with quantum processes in ways that we're only beginning to understand. These findings, if verified, would have profound implications for our understanding of both consciousness and quantum mechanics. They would suggest that the observer effect extends beyond laboratory instruments to include conscious awareness itself, making mind not just a passive observer of reality, but an active participant in its creation. The implications extend naturally to phenomena like remote viewing. If consciousness can influence quantum systems through focused attention, and if quantum entanglement allows for non-local correlations that transcend space and time, then perhaps the ability to access distant information isn't supernatural, but rather a natural consequence of how consciousness operates in a quantum universe. To understand how consciousness might access non-local information, we need to explore one of the most radical ideas in modern physics: the holographic principle. This concept, which emerged from theoretical work on black holes and quantum gravity, suggests that all the information contained in a volume of space can be encoded on its two-dimensional boundary, much like how a hologram stores three-dimensional images on a flat surface. If the universe operates according to holographic principles, then every region of space might contain information about every other region, readily accessible to systems that can decode this holographic information. Some interpretations suggest that consciousness operating through quantum processes might naturally have access to this holographic information network. David Bohm, a prominent physicist who made significant contributions to quantum theory, proposed that the universe might be fundamentally holographic in nature. In Bohm's model, what we perceive as separate objects and distinct locations are actually expressions of an underlying unified field of information. This implicate order, as he called it, contains all possible information about the universe, while our everyday experience of separate objects and locations represents the explicate order that unfolds from this deeper unity. If Bohm's vision is correct, then consciousness might naturally have access to information from any point in space and time through its connection to the implicate order. Remote viewing, in this framework, wouldn't involve sending consciousness to distant locations, but rather accessing the holographic information that already exists everywhere. This holographic model also provides a potential explanation for other anomalous phenomena that have puzzled researchers. Precognition, the apparent ability to perceive future events, might represent access to information about probable future states that exist in the holographic structure of space-time. Similarly, telepathy might involve accessing information about other conscious beings through the same holographic network. The holographic principle isn't just philosophical speculation, it has become a serious area of research in theoretical physics, with applications to quantum gravity, string theory, and cosmology. If the universe is indeed fundamentally holographic, then phenomena that seem impossible from our everyday perspective might be natural consequences of reality's deeper structure. As we explore these ideas, notice how they might shift your understanding of what it means to be conscious, to be aware, to know things about the world around you. If consciousness has access to a holographic information network that transcends space and time, what might that suggest about the true scope of your awareness? One of the most intriguing attempts to test whether consciousness can influence physical reality on a global scale is the Global Consciousness Project, an international collaboration that has been collecting data for over 2 decades. The project uses a network of random number generators stationed around the world to detect possible correlations between global events and deviations from randomness in quantum systems. The hypothesis underlying this research is that moments of intense collective focus or emotion might create measurable changes in quantum random processes. During major global events like natural disasters, terrorist attacks, or moments of worldwide celebration, the project monitors whether the network of random number generators shows coordinated deviations from expected randomness. The results have been both fascinating and controversial. During events like the September 11th attacks, the death of Princess Diana, and other moments that captured global attention, the network showed statistically significant departures from randomness. These anomalies often began hours before the events became widely known, suggesting that the effect might transcend normal temporal boundaries. Over hundreds of formally defined events analysed during nearly 20 years of continuous monitoring, the odds against the observed correlations occurring by chance have reached astronomical levels. If the data is accurate, it suggests that collective human consciousness might indeed influence quantum processes on a global scale. Critics rightfully point out the challenges in interpreting such correlations. The selection of events, the definition of time windows, and the statistical methods used all introduce potential sources of bias. However, the consistency of the findings across different types of events and the involvement of multiple independent research groups lend credibility to the possibility that something genuinely anomalous is occurring. If collective consciousness can influence quantum systems, it would provide support for theories suggesting that individual consciousness operates through quantum processes. It would also suggest that the boundaries between individual minds might be more fluid than we typically assume, with global events creating temporary states of collective coherence that manifest in measurable physical effects. This research represents a bridge between laboratory studies of consciousness and quantum mechanics, and the larger question of whether awareness plays a fundamental role in shaping reality. While the findings remain controversial and require continued investigation, they point toward possibilities that could revolutionize our understanding of both consciousness and the nature of physical reality itself. Perhaps nowhere does the intersection of consciousness and quantum mechanics become more challenging to our conventional worldview than in the realm of time and precognition. Classical physics treats time as a one-way flow from past to future, but quantum mechanics reveals a far more complex relationship between time, information, and observation. Delayed choice experiments in quantum mechanics have shown that future measurements can influence the apparent history of quantum systems. In these experiments, the decision of how to measure a quantum particle after it has already passed through an experimental apparatus determines whether the particle's earlier behavior appears wave-like or particle-like. This suggests that the future can influence the past in ways that challenge our normal understanding of temporal causality. If consciousness operates through quantum processes, as some theories suggest, then it might naturally have access to information from multiple points in time. Precognition, in this framework, wouldn't violate the laws of physics, but rather reveal aspects of time structure that remain hidden in our everyday experience. Research into precognitive phenomena has produced some of the most intriguing and controversial results in consciousness studies. Experiments conducted at various universities have found evidence for what researchers term presentiment, physiological responses to future events that occur before the events are experienced or even determined. In these studies, participants are connected to devices that monitor skin conductance, heart rate, and other physiological indicators while they view a series of images on a computer screen. Some images are emotionally neutral, while others are designed to produce strong emotional responses. The remarkable finding is that participants' physiological systems often respond to emotional images several seconds before the images are actually displayed, as if their bodies are preparing for future emotional states. These presentiment effects have been replicated in multiple laboratories and appear to occur even when the selection of which image will be shown is determined by quantum random number generators at the moment of display. This suggests that the precognitive response isn't based on unconscious cues or subtle patterns, but might represent genuine access to future information. The implications are profound. If consciousness can access information from future time points through quantum processes, it suggests that time itself might be far more fluid than our everyday experience indicates. The future might not be a blank slate waiting to be written, but rather a landscape of possibilities that consciousness can explore through quantum non-locality. This perspective transforms precognition from a supernatural phenomenon into a potential natural consequence of how consciousness operates in a quantum universe. Just as quantum entanglement allows for instantaneous correlations across space, quantum processes in consciousness might allow for correlations across time, enabling awareness to transcend the apparent flow from past to future. As we contemplate these possibilities, take a moment to reflect on your own experiences of intuition, hunches, or seemingly inexplicable knowledge about future events. Might these moments represent glimpses of consciousness operating according to quantum principles that transcend our normal understanding of time and causality? The investigation of consciousness and quantum mechanics has moved from theoretical speculation to experimental science, with researchers developing increasingly sophisticated methods for testing whether consciousness can influence quantum systems. These studies represent some of the most challenging and controversial research in modern science, pushing the boundaries of what we consider measurable and repeatable. One particularly intriguing line of research involves testing whether meditation and other consciousness practices might enhance whatever quantum effects exist between mind and matter. Some studies have found that experienced meditators show stronger correlations with quantum random number generators than control groups, suggesting that training in focused attention might amplify consciousness quantum interactions. Either experiments have investigated whether emotional states, intention, or specific mental techniques can influence quantum systems in measurable ways. While the effects are typically small and require sophisticated statistical analysis to detect, they appear to be real and reproducible under carefully controlled conditions. The challenge in this field lies not just in detecting these subtle effects, but in understanding their mechanism. If consciousness does influence quantum systems, how does this influence propagate from the quantum processes in the brain to external quantum devices? What is the range of such effects, and do they follow any of the known laws of physics? Some researchers have proposed that consciousness might influence quantum systems through what they term morphic resonance or field effects that operate outside the electromagnetic spectrum. Others suggest that the influence might work through quantum entanglements between consciousness and quantum systems, creating non-local correlations that don't require conventional energy transfer. These questions push science into territory where the distinction between observer and observed becomes increasingly unclear. If consciousness can influence the quantum systems it studies, then the traditional scientific ideal of objective observation becomes problematic. How do we study consciousness objectively when consciousness itself might be influencing our measuring devices? This challenge has led some researchers to develop new methodological approaches that acknowledge consciousness as an active participant in the experimental process rather than trying to eliminate its influence. These participatory research methods recognize that in studying consciousness, we might need to abandon the illusion of complete objectivity and develop new ways of understanding the relationship between knower and known. The results of this research, while still preliminary and controversial, suggest that consciousness might indeed operate through quantum processes that allow it to influence physical reality in subtle but measurable ways. If these findings are confirmed and refined, they could revolutionize our understanding of both consciousness and quantum mechanics, revealing them to be intimately connected aspects of a unified reality. As we continue this gentle exploration into the mysteries of consciousness and quantum mechanics, let's pause for a moment and consider the architecture of your own awareness. Right now, as you listen to these words, countless quantum processes are unfolding within the neurons of your brain. Each thought, each moment of understanding, each flicker of curiosity involves billions of quantum events occurring in perfect orchestration. Recent discoveries in neuroscience have revealed that the brain operates far more like a quantum system than the classical computer we once imagined it to be. The neural networks that generate your thoughts don't simply process information linearly from input to output. Instead, they create what researchers describe as quantum-like states of superposition, where multiple possible thoughts and responses exist simultaneously until the moment of conscious decision collapses them into a single experience. This isn't mere metaphor. Studies using advanced brain imaging techniques have detected quantum coherence in neural microtubules at body temperature, defying earlier assumptions that quantum effects would be impossible in the warm, chaotic environment of living tissue. The implications are profound. If your consciousness operates through quantum processes, then the strange non-local properties we've been discussing might not be exotic phenomena requiring special abilities, but rather natural consequences of how awareness itself functions. Consider the experience of intuition, That sudden knowing, that seems to arise from nowhere. Traditional neuroscience struggles to explain how the brain can process complex information and arrive at insights faster than conscious reasoning should allow. But if consciousness operates through quantum processes, intuition might represent moments when awareness accesses the non-local information field that quantum mechanics reveals underlies all reality. Some interpretations suggest that what we call creativity, insight, and even inspiration might be consciousness momentarily transcending the classical boundaries of space and time to access information from the quantum realm. This remains speculative, but it offers a fascinating framework for understanding why breakthrough insights often seem to come not through logical progression, but through sudden leaps that connect disparate ideas in unexpected ways. The research emerging from laboratories around the world continues to challenge our assumptions about the relationship between mind and matter. Studies have found evidence for quantum entanglement between the brains of individuals engaged in meditation together, suggesting that consciousness might create connections that transcend individual nervous systems. While these findings remain preliminary and require careful replication, they point toward possibilities that could revolutionize our understanding of what it means to be conscious. One of the most intriguing applications of quantum consciousness research lies in the realm of healing and human connection. While we must be careful not to overstate the current evidence, some studies have begun to explore whether the quantum processes underlying consciousness might play a role in phenomena that conventional medicine struggles to explain. Research into the placebo effect, for instance, has revealed that the mere expectation of healing can produce measurable physiological changes that go far beyond what should be possible through psychological suggestion alone. Brain scans show that placebo treatments can activate the same neural pathways as actual medications, releasing endorphins, reducing inflammation, and even influencing genetic expression. Some interpretations suggest that these effects might involve quantum processes where consciousness influences the body's healing mechanisms through non-local correlations between mind and matter. This remains unproven and highly speculative, but it offers a potential framework for understanding how belief and intention might translate into physical healing effects. Similarly, studies of prayer and distant healing have produced results that, while controversial, suggest the possibility of non-local effects between human consciousness and biological systems. Meta-analyses of these studies show small but statistically significant effects that persist even when conducted under carefully controlled conditions designed to eliminate conventional explanations. The mechanism behind such effects, if they exist, remains mysterious. However, if consciousness operates through quantum processes that can transcend space and time, then the possibility of healing influence at a distance becomes less supernatural and more a natural consequence of quantum non-locality applied to biological systems. Research into the electromagnetic fields generated by the human heart has revealed that these fields can be detected several feet away from the body and appear to carry information about emotional states. Some studies suggest that these fields might influence the nervous systems of nearby individuals, creating a form of biological communication that operates below the threshold of conscious awareness. While we must emphasize that these findings remain preliminary and controversial, they hint at the possibility that human consciousness might generate fields or influences that extend beyond the boundaries of individual bodies. If consciousness involves quantum processes, These influences might operate through mechanisms that transcend classical physics, allowing for forms of connection and communication that we're only beginning to understand. As you reflect on these possibilities, take a moment to sense your connection to the world around you. Notice how your awareness seems to extend beyond the boundaries of your physical body, reaching out to touch the environment, other people, even distant places through memory and imagination. The concept of collective consciousness has appeared throughout human history in various forms, from Carl Jung's collective unconscious to indigenous traditions that speak of the interconnectedness of all life. Quantum mechanics now provides a potential scientific framework for understanding how such collective awareness might actually function. If consciousness operates through quantum processes, and if quantum entanglement allows for non-local correlations between distant systems, then individual minds might be connected through what some researchers describe as a quantum consciousness field. This field would allow for information sharing and collective processing that transcends the apparent boundaries between separate brains. Evidence for such collective effects has been found in studies of group meditation, where EEG recordings show synchronization of brainwave patterns between participants even when they're separated by significant distances. Some interpretations suggest that these synchronizations might represent quantum entanglement between the consciousness of different individuals, creating temporary states of collective awareness. The Global Consciousness Project, which we discussed earlier, continues to provide intriguing data suggesting that major world events correlate with measurable changes in quantum random systems worldwide. While the interpretation of these correlations remains controversial, they point toward the possibility that collective human attention and emotion might influence physical reality through quantum processes. Some theories propose that what we experience as social intuition, mass movements, and cultural shifts might actually represent manifestations of quantum collective consciousness effects. The sudden emergence of similar ideas in different locations, the way innovations often appear simultaneously among unconnected researchers, and the mysterious process by which social movements spread could all potentially involve quantum information transfer between individual consciousnesses. This perspective transforms our understanding of society and culture from purely classical interactions between separate individuals to something more like a quantum system, where all parts remain connected through non-local correlations. While this remains highly speculative, it offers a fascinating framework for understanding human collective behaviour and the emergence of shared meaning and purpose. If consciousness is indeed quantum in nature, then your individual awareness might be connected to a vast network of consciousness that extends throughout humanity and potentially beyond. This doesn't diminish your individuality, but rather suggests that individuality and interconnectedness might be complementary aspects of a deeper quantum reality. To understand how consciousness might access non-local information, we need to explore one of the most radical developments in modern physics: the idea that information, rather than matter or energy, might be the fundamental building block of reality. This information theoretic view of the universe suggests that what we perceive as solid matter and empty space are actually patterns in an underlying field of pure information. Quantum mechanics has revealed that information plays a central role in physical reality. The quantum state of any system can be described as information about the probabilities of different measurement outcomes. When quantum systems become entangled, they share information in ways that transcend classical limitations of space and time. Some physicists now propose that the universe itself might be fundamentally computational, with reality emerging from information processing at the deepest level. This information-based view of reality provides a natural framework for understanding how consciousness might access distant or future information. If consciousness operates through quantum information processing, and if the universe itself is made of information, then awareness might naturally have access to information patterns throughout space and time. Consider how this might apply to remote viewing. Rather than consciousness somehow traveling to distant locations, remote viewers might be accessing information patterns that exist everywhere in the quantum information field that underlies reality. The holographic principle in physics suggests that all information about any region of space is encoded on its boundaries, meaning that information about distant locations might be accessible locally through quantum information channels. Similarly, precognition might involve accessing information about probable future states that exist as quantum superpositions in the information structure of space-time. Rather than seeing a fixed future, precognitive experiences might represent glimpses of the probability landscapes that quantum mechanics reveals underlying all physical processes. This information theoretic approach also provides a framework for understanding how consciousness might influence physical reality. If consciousness involves quantum information processing, and if physical reality emerges from information patterns, then conscious intention might influence reality by introducing new information into quantum systems. While these ideas remain highly speculative, they represent serious attempts by physicists and consciousness researchers to develop scientific frameworks for understanding phenomena that challenge our classical worldview. The emerging field of quantum information theory continues to reveal new ways that information can be processed, transmitted, and accessed that transcend classical limitations. As we delve deeper into these mysteries, let's return to one of the most fundamental puzzles in quantum mechanics, the measurement problem. This isn't just an abstract philosophical issue, but a practical question that goes to the heart of how consciousness might relate to physical reality. In quantum mechanics, systems exist in superposition states until they're measured, at which point the wave function collapses and the system takes on a definite value. But what constitutes a measurement? Is it the interaction with a detector, or could conscious observation itself play a role in collapsing quantum wave functions? Some interpretations of quantum mechanics, including those proposed by physicists like Eugene Wigner and John von Neumann, suggest that consciousness might be necessary for wave function collapse. In this view, quantum systems remain in superposition until observed by a conscious mind, making consciousness a fundamental component of physical reality rather than an emergent property of complex matter. This interpretation remains controversial among physicists, but it has profound implications for understanding phenomena like remote viewing and precognition. If consciousness plays a fundamental role in determining which quantum outcomes become real, then focused attention and intention might influence reality in ways that transcend classical physics. Recent experiments have attempted to test whether conscious observation differs from mechanical detection in quantum systems. While the results remain preliminary and controversial, some studies suggest that human consciousness might indeed interact with quantum systems in ways that pure mechanical devices do not. One particularly intriguing line of research involves testing whether meditation and other consciousness practices affect quantum systems differently than passive observation. Some studies have found that experienced meditators show stronger correlations with quantum random number generators than control groups, suggesting that trained consciousness might enhance whatever quantum effects exist between mind and matter. These findings, while requiring careful replication and validation, point toward the possibility that consciousness operates according to quantum principles that allow it to participate directly in the fundamental processes that determine physical reality. Rather than being passive observers of an objective world, conscious beings might be active participants in the ongoing creation of reality through quantum processes. Take a breath here and imagine what it might mean if your consciousness truly participates in shaping reality at the quantum level. How might this change your understanding of your role in the world around you? One of the most profound implications of quantum consciousness research is what it suggests about the nature of space and time themselves. If consciousness operates through quantum processes that transcend classical space-time limitations, then awareness might naturally exist in a realm where the usual rules of distance and duration don't apply. This perspective resonates with the reports from advanced meditators and contemplatives throughout history who describe states of consciousness that seem to transcend ordinary spatial and temporal boundaries. These experiences, often dismissed as purely subjective or hallucinatory, might actually represent consciousness accessing its natural quantum properties. In deep meditative states, practitioners often report experiences of boundless awareness that seems to encompass vast distances instantaneously. Time may seem to stop or flow differently, with moments stretching into eternities or hours passing in what feels like seconds. These reports suggest that consciousness might not be as constrained by classical space-time as we typically assume. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics support this possibility. The many worlds interpretation, for instance, suggests that all possible quantum outcomes exist simultaneously in parallel realities. If consciousness operates through quantum processes, it might naturally have access to information from multiple timelines or parallel possibilities. Similarly, theories of quantum gravity suggest that space and time themselves might be emergent properties arising from more fundamental quantum information processes. If consciousness operates at this fundamental level, it might transcend the space-time limitations that constrain classical physical processes. This perspective transforms phenomena like remote viewing and precognition from violations of natural law into natural expressions of consciousness operating according to its true quantum nature. Rather than acquiring supernatural abilities, individuals who demonstrate these phenomena might simply be accessing capabilities that are natural to consciousness, but normally filtered out by our classical assumptions about space and time. The implications extend to our understanding of death and the continuity of consciousness. If awareness operates through quantum processes that transcend space-time, then consciousness might not be as dependent on classical brain function as materialist theories assume. While this remains highly speculative, it offers a scientific framework for considering possibilities that have been central to human spiritual traditions for millennia. As we approach the deeper mysteries of quantum consciousness, we encounter a fundamental question that challenges the very foundations of scientific methodology. What happens when the observer and the observed are aspects of the same quantum system? Traditional science assumes a clear separation between the objective world being studied and the subjective consciousness doing the studying. This assumption allows for the ideal of objective knowledge obtained through detached observation. But if consciousness operates through quantum processes, and if these processes are inherently non-local and interconnected, then the observer-observed distinction becomes far more complex. In quantum mechanics, the act of observation fundamentally changes the system being observed. This isn't simply a practical limitation, but a fundamental feature of quantum reality. If consciousness involves quantum processes, then any scientific study of consciousness inevitably involves consciousness studying itself through quantum interactions. This creates what some researchers call the participation problem in consciousness research. How do we study consciousness objectively when consciousness itself might be influencing the quantum systems used to study it? Some researchers have embraced this challenge by developing participatory research methods that acknowledge consciousness as an active participant in the experimental process. These approaches recognize that in studying consciousness, we might need to abandon the illusion of complete objectivity and develop new ways of understanding the relationship between knower and known. Rather than trying to eliminate the influence of consciousness on quantum systems, these methods attempt to work with that influence as a natural feature of reality. The results of such participatory research continue to challenge our assumptions about the boundaries between mind and matter. Studies using this approach have found evidence for consciousness quantum interactions that don't appear in traditional double-blind methodologies, suggesting that the attempt to eliminate consciousness from experiments might actually eliminate the very phenomena being studied. If you enjoy drifting through these explorations without interruption, members get every episode 48 hours early, completely ad-free. You can join them whenever you feel ready. These participatory approaches to consciousness research represent a potential paradigm shift in how we understand the relationship between science and consciousness, suggesting that consciousness might be too fundamental to reality to be studied as a mere object of investigation. As we near the culmination of our exploration, let's turn our attention to perhaps the most personal question of all. What does quantum consciousness theory suggest about the nature of yourself, your identity, your sense of being a unique individual in the universe? If consciousness operates through quantum processes, then your sense of self might be far more fluid and interconnected than classical psychology suggests. Quantum systems don't have fixed, definite properties until they're observed, and even then, those properties emerge from interactions with other systems rather than existing independently. This quantum view of selfhood suggests that your identity might be more like a standing wave pattern in the ocean of consciousness rather than a solid separate entity. Just as a wave maintains its form while being composed of ever-changing water molecules, your sense of self might maintain continuity while being composed of ever-changing quantum processes that connect you to the larger fabric of reality. This perspective offers a scientific framework for understanding experiences that mystics and contemplatives have described for millennia. The dissolution of ego boundaries, the sense of unity with all existence, and the recognition that individual consciousness might be a localized expression of universal awareness. Some interpretations suggest that what we call individual consciousness might be like whirlpools in a stream, temporary patterns of organization in a larger flow of awareness that encompasses all conscious beings. This doesn't diminish your uniqueness, but rather suggests that uniqueness and unity might be complementary aspects of quantum consciousness. The implications for personal transformation are profound. If your consciousness operates through quantum processes that connect you to the larger field of awareness, then practices like meditation, contemplation, and conscious intention might literally tune your individual awareness to broader frequencies of consciousness that transcend personal limitations. This quantum understanding of selfhood also suggests new possibilities for healing, growth, and human potential. Rather than being trapped within the boundaries of classical neural networks, consciousness might have access to quantum resources that allow for rapid learning, creative insight, and even healing that transcends normal biological limitations. As we prepare to complete this journey through the quantum realms of consciousness, let's look toward the horizons that these discoveries might open. The intersection of quantum mechanics and consciousness research represents one of the most exciting frontiers in science, with implications that could transform our understanding of reality itself. Emerging technologies are beginning to provide new tools for investigating quantum consciousness effects. Quantum computers, which harness quantum superposition and entanglement for information processing, might eventually be used to test whether consciousness operates through similar quantum principles. Brain-computer interfaces based on quantum sensors could detect quantum processes in neural tissue with unprecedented precision. Research into quantum biology continues to reveal quantum effects in living systems that were previously thought impossible. Photosynthesis, bird navigation, and enzyme function all appear to involve quantum processes, suggesting that life has evolved sophisticated mechanisms for harnessing quantum effects. If consciousness also involves quantum biology, these discoveries provide templates for understanding how quantum coherence might be maintained in warm, noisy biological environments. The philosophical implications of quantum consciousness research extend beyond science into questions of meaning, purpose, and human potential. If consciousness truly operates through quantum processes that transcend classical space-time limitations, then human awareness might have capabilities that we're only beginning to discover. These possibilities don't diminish the importance of classical neuroscience and psychology, but rather suggest that consciousness might involve multiple levels of organization, from classical neural networks to quantum information processing. Understanding both levels and their interactions could lead to breakthrough insights into the nature of awareness itself. The practical applications of quantum consciousness research might include new approaches to education that work with the quantum nature of learning and memory, healing modalities that address consciousness at quantum levels, and technologies that enhance human potential by supporting the quantum processes underlying awareness. As research in this field continues to evolve, we stand at the threshold of discoveries that could revolutionize our understanding of what it means to be conscious, to be human, and to exist in a universe that appears to be far more mysterious and interconnected than we ever imagined. Throughout our exploration, we've ventured into territory that mainstream science has often considered forbidden or impossible. The idea that consciousness might influence physical reality through quantum processes challenges fundamental assumptions about objectivity, causation, and the nature of mind and matter. Yet, as we've seen, this forbidden territory is being explored by serious researchers using rigorous scientific methods. The phenomena we've discussed aren't the product of wishful thinking or supernatural belief, but rather emerge from careful investigation of anomalies that don't fit classical models of reality. The resistance to these ideas within mainstream science is understandable. They challenge not just specific theories, but the entire worldview that has guided scientific progress for centuries. The notion that consciousness might be fundamental to reality rather than emergent from matter represents a paradigm shift comparable to the transition from classical to quantum physics. But paradigm shifts in science often begin with anomalies that don't fit existing theories. The strange behaviour of black body radiation led to quantum mechanics. Unexplained planetary motions revealed general relativity. Perhaps the anomalies in consciousness research are pointing toward the next great revolution in our understanding of reality. This doesn't mean we should abandon scientific rigour or critical thinking. Rather, it suggests that we might need to expand our definition of what constitutes rigorous science to include phenomena that don't fit classical assumptions about objectivity and causation. The forbidden territory of quantum consciousness research might ultimately reveal new continents of knowledge about the nature of awareness, reality, and human potential. As with any frontier, exploration requires courage, careful mapping, and willingness to question assumptions that once seemed unquestionable. As you continue to contemplate these mysteries in your own life, remember that science advances not by avoiding difficult questions, but by following evidence wherever it leads, even when it leads to conclusions that challenge everything we thought we knew about the nature of existence. As our journey through the quantum realms of consciousness draws to a close, we find ourselves standing before a mirror that reflects not just light and matter, but the very nature of awareness itself. What we've discovered together suggests that consciousness might not be the accidental byproduct of complex chemistry that materialist science has long assumed, but rather a fundamental feature of reality that operates according to the same mysterious principles governing the quantum universe. The evidence we've explored, while still emerging and controversial, points toward possibilities that could transform our understanding of what it means to be conscious, to be connected, and to participate in the ongoing creation of reality. From the CIA's remote viewing programs to laboratory studies of quantum consciousness effects, from the holographic universe to the architecture of awareness itself, we've seen how the boundaries between mind and matter might be far more fluid than we ever imagined. This isn't the end of our exploration, but rather an invitation to continue questioning, investigating, and remaining open to discoveries that challenge our deepest assumptions about the nature of existence. The quantum realm reveals a universe that is stranger, more interconnected, and more conscious than classical physics ever suggested. As you drift into sleep tonight, perhaps carrying these ideas into your dreams, remember that you are not a passive observer of reality, but potentially an active participant in its quantum unfolding. Your consciousness, with all its mysteries and possibilities, might be intimately connected to the fundamental processes that bring reality into being. The forbidden theory we've explored together might not remain forbidden forever. Science advances through brave exploration of the impossible, and what seems impossible today might become tomorrow's breakthrough in our understanding of consciousness, reality, and the extraordinary universe we call home. Sweet dreams, fellow explorers. And if you're curious about how your sleeping consciousness might connect to quantum realities in ways even stranger than what we've discussed tonight, I invite you to explore. Your dreams might be parallel universes. Are you seeing another version of yourself? Where we'll journey into the mysterious realm where quantum mechanics meets the landscape of dreams, revealing possibilities that might transform how you understand every moment of rest and every glimpse of the impossible worlds that unfold behind your sleeping eyes. Until we meet again in the quiet spaces where science and mystery dance together, rest well in the knowledge that you are part of something far more wonderful and strange than the classical world ever dared to imagine. Ever and strange than the classical world dared to imagine. As we continue floating through this exploration, of consciousness and quantum reality, let's turn our attention to a question that might change how you experience every moment of your waking life. What if the very act of being aware is fundamentally creative, participating in an ongoing dance of possibilities that extends far beyond your individual mind? Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that reality exists as a vast field of potential states, with observation playing a role in selecting which possibilities become manifest. While no scientific consensus exists on consciousness directly causing quantum events, this framework offers a profound metaphor for understanding how awareness might participate in the unfolding of experience. Consider the simple act of paying attention to your breath right now. As you focus your awareness, you're selecting this particular moment of breathing from countless other possible moments of attention. You could be noticing the sounds around you, the temperature of the air, the feeling of your clothes against your skin. But by choosing to attend to your breath, you're participating in a creative act of selection that shapes your immediate reality. This selection process, while not quantum mechanical in the literal sense, mirrors the way quantum systems appear to transition from multiple possible states to definite outcomes. Your consciousness becomes a kind of selector, choosing which aspects of the infinite present moment to illuminate with awareness. Recent research in neuroscience has revealed that attention operates more like a creative process than a passive spotlight. When you focus on something, your brain doesn't simply receive information about that object. Instead, it actively constructs your experience through complex interactions between sensory input, memory, expectation, and intention. In a very real sense, the act of conscious attention participates in creating the reality you experience. This creative aspect of consciousness becomes particularly intriguing when we consider how it might relate to the quantum field theories we've been exploring. While we must be careful not to conflate metaphor with mechanism, the parallels are striking. Both consciousness and quantum systems seem to involve the selection of definite experiences from fields of possibility. Some contemplative traditions have long described consciousness as fundamentally creative, participating in the ongoing manifestation of reality through the quality of attention we bring to each moment. Modern neuroscience is beginning to provide scientific frameworks for understanding how this creative process might actually work, revealing consciousness to be far more active and participatory than the passive observer model suggests. Take a moment to reflect on how your own awareness seems to ripple outward, touching not just your immediate experience, but somehow extending into the world around you. When you enter a room, you don't just observe it, you participate in it, changing the energy and atmosphere simply through your presence. This ripple effect of consciousness has been studied in various contexts, though the results remain preliminary and require careful interpretation. Some research has explored whether the quality of attention brought to situations might influence outcomes in subtle but measurable ways, though no scientific consensus exists on direct consciousness-reality interactions. One particularly intriguing area of investigation involves what researchers call observer effects in complex social systems. Studies have found correlations between the presence of certain individuals and improvements in group dynamics, creative problem solving, and even measurable changes in electromagnetic fields around meditation groups. While these findings remain controversial and don't imply direct causal relationships, they suggest that consciousness might participate in reality in ways that extend beyond individual neural networks. The Global Consciousness Project, which we discussed earlier, continues to collect data suggesting correlations between collective human attention and deviations in quantum random systems worldwide. While the interpretation of these correlations remains debated, they point toward possibilities that consciousness might be more interconnected than classical psychology assumes. Some interpretations suggest that these effects might work through what researchers term morphic fields, or information fields that operate outside conventional electromagnetic spectra. While these theories remain unproven and speculative, they offer frameworks for understanding how consciousness might influence reality through mechanisms that transcend classical physics. The implications of such research, if validated, would transform our understanding of social dynamics, healing, education, and human potential. Rather than being isolated individuals whose consciousness stops at the boundaries of our skulls, we might be participants in a vast network of awareness that extends throughout human communities and potentially beyond. This perspective doesn't require accepting supernatural explanations, but rather expanding our understanding of what consciousness might be and how it might operate. Just as quantum mechanics revealed that particles are more interconnected than classical physics assumed, consciousness research might be revealing that awareness is more participatory and creative than classical psychology suggests. As you listen to these ideas, notice how they might apply to your own daily experience. Every interaction you have, every conversation, every moment of focused attention becomes a kind of experiment in consciousness, an opportunity to explore how awareness participates in shaping experience. Consider the phenomenon of intuition, which most of us have experienced but few of us fully understand. That sudden knowing that seems to arise from nowhere, the sense of rightness about a decision before you can logically justify it, the feeling that you should call someone just before they contact you. Traditional cognitive science struggles to explain these experiences, but they become more comprehensible when viewed through the lens of consciousness as a participatory process that might transcend classical information processing. Some research suggests that intuitive insights might involve rapid processing of subtle environmental cues that don't reach conscious awareness. The heart, for instance, contains a complex neural network that processes emotional and environmental information and can influence brain function in ways that generate feelings of knowing before conscious reasoning catches up. Other interpretations, while more speculative, suggest that intuition might represent moments when consciousness accesses non-local information through quantum-like processes. While no scientific proof exists for such mechanisms, the subjective experience of intuition often feels like receiving information from sources beyond conventional sensory channels. The practice of developing intuitive abilities, whether through meditation, contemplative practices, or simply paying attention to subtle inner promptings, becomes a way of exploring consciousness as a creative, participatory process. Rather than trying to force supernatural abilities to manifest, these practices might simply be learning to work with natural capacities that consciousness already possesses, but that are usually filtered out by our focus on classical, logical thinking. Many contemplative traditions describe stages of development where awareness becomes increasingly subtle, sensitive, and interconnected. While these descriptions are often couched in spiritual language, they might actually be describing natural potentials of consciousness that become accessible as we learn to attune to more subtle levels of information and connection. This doesn't require abandoning rational thinking or critical analysis, but rather expanding our repertoire of ways of knowing to include the more subtle, intuitive, and creative aspects of consciousness. The integration of rational and intuitive ways of knowing might represent a more complete approach to understanding reality than either approach alone can provide. One of the most profound applications of consciousness research lies in understanding the role that awareness might play in health, healing, and human well-being. While we must be careful to distinguish between scientifically supported findings and speculative interpretations, emerging research suggests that consciousness might influence physical health in ways that extend beyond what conventional medicine typically considers. The placebo effect, for instance, demonstrates that belief and expectation can produce measurable physiological changes that sometimes equal or exceed the effects of active medications. Brain imaging studies show that placebo treatments can activate the same neural pathways as pharmaceutical interventions, releasing natural painkillers, reducing inflammation, and even influencing immune function. Some interpretations suggest that these effects might involve consciousness influencing physical processes through quantum-like mechanisms, though this remains unproven and highly speculative. What's clear is that the relationship between mind and body is far more intimate and dynamic than the mechanical model of medicine typically assumes. Research into meditation and contemplative practices has revealed measurable effects on brain structure, immune function, stress hormones, and even genetic expression. Long-term meditators show increased grey matter density in areas associated with learning and memory, decreased activity in brain regions associated with stress and anxiety, and improved immune function that persists even when they're not actively meditating. These findings suggest that consciousness practices might literally reshape the brain and body in beneficial ways. While the mechanisms remain unclear, the effects appear to involve consciousness learning to regulate its own activity in ways that optimize both mental and physical well-being. Some studies have explored whether focused attention and intention might influence healing in ways that transcend conventional understanding. Research into prayer, distant healing, and therapeutic touch has produced mixed but intriguing results, with some studies showing small but statistically significant effects that persist even under carefully controlled conditions. While these findings remain controversial and require careful replication, they suggest the possibility that consciousness might participate in healing through mechanisms that we don't yet fully understand. Rather than seeking supernatural explanations, researchers are exploring whether healing might involve natural processes of connection and communication that operate through subtle electromagnetic, quantum, or information fields. The practical implications focus not on claiming miraculous cures, but on recognizing consciousness as an active participant in health and healing. This perspective encourages approaches to medicine that honor both the biochemical and the conscious aspects of human beings, potentially leading to more effective and holistic healing modalities. As we drift deeper into these contemplations, let's explore how consciousness might participate in the creative processes that seem to permeate the universe at every level. From the self-organization of galaxies to the emergence of life, to the flowering of human creativity, reality appears to be fundamentally creative, constantly bringing forth new forms, patterns, and possibilities. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that creativity might be built into the fabric of reality itself. The quantum vacuum, rather than being empty space, seethes with virtual particles that appear and disappear in constant creative ferment. Quantum superposition allows particles to exist in multiple states simultaneously until observation selects particular outcomes. Even quantum tunneling enables particles to transcend classical barriers in ways that seem impossibly creative. If consciousness operates through quantum processes, as some theories propose, then human creativity might be participating in this cosmic creative process. The moments of inspiration when new ideas seem to arise from nowhere, the artistic breakthroughs that surprise even their creators, the scientific insights that connect previously unrelated concepts might all represent consciousness accessing the creative potential that quantum mechanics reveals underlying all reality. While this remains speculative, it offers a profound framework for understanding creativity, not as a purely personal achievement, but as a participation in the universe's ongoing creative unfolding. Artists, scientists, musicians, and writers become collaborators with the creative processes that brought forth stars, planets, life, and consciousness itself. This perspective transforms creative practice from an attempt to force something new into existence to a process of attunement to the creative potential that already permeates reality. Rather than creating from nothing, consciousness might be learning to recognize and give form to the infinite creativity that quantum mechanics reveals underlying the apparent stability of classical reality. Many artists and creators report that their best work feels less like personal achievement and more like receiving or channeling something that comes through them rather than from them. While we need not invoke supernatural explanations for these experiences, they might represent moments when individual consciousness aligns with the deeper creative processes that operate throughout the universe. This view of creativity as participation rather than production might lead to new approaches to education, innovation, and problem solving that work with consciousness's natural creative capacities rather than trying to force predetermined outcomes through willpower alone. Take a moment to consider your own consciousness, not as a fixed entity, but as an evolving process that continues to develop throughout your life. From the simple awareness of infancy to the complex self-reflection of adulthood, consciousness appears to undergo continuous development and transformation. Some theories suggest that this individual development of consciousness might mirror a larger evolutionary process occurring throughout the universe. Just as matter has evolved from simple particles to complex molecules to living organisms to conscious beings, consciousness itself might be evolving toward greater complexity, integration, and interconnection. Recent research in developmental psychology and neuroscience has revealed that consciousness continues to evolve throughout adult life in ways that were previously unrecognized. Advanced stages of psychological development involve increasing integration of rational and intuitive ways of knowing, expanded capacity for perspective taking, and growing sensitivity to subtle aspects of experience that remain invisible to earlier developmental stages. Some interpretations suggest that these developmental processes might involve consciousness learning to access more subtle levels of reality, including the quantum processes we've been exploring. While this remains speculative, it offers a framework for understanding spiritual and contemplative experiences as natural developments of consciousness rather than supernatural phenomena. Contemplative traditions from various cultures describe advanced practitioners developing abilities that seem to transcend ordinary limitations of consciousness: enhanced intuition, expanded awareness, the ability to influence physical and emotional states through mental practices, and even apparent access to non-local information might represent natural potentials of consciousness that become available as awareness evolves beyond its ordinary developmental boundaries. While we must be careful not to make claims about supernatural abilities, these reports suggest that consciousness might have capacities that remain largely dormant in most individuals, but can be developed through appropriate practices and training. The evolution of consciousness might involve learning to access and integrate these subtler capacities with ordinary, rational awareness. This evolutionary perspective on consciousness suggests that the anomalous phenomena we've been exploring might not be violations of natural law, but rather expressions of consciousness operating at developmental levels that transcend its ordinary limitations. Rather than seeking to acquire special powers, consciousness development might involve recognizing and actualizing capacities that are natural to awareness but usually remain unconscious. As our exploration continues to unfold, let's reflect on how the scientific study of consciousness necessarily involves consciousness studying itself. This creates a unique methodological challenge that distinguishes consciousness research from other scientific disciplines and might require new approaches to knowledge that transcend the traditional subject-object distinction. When consciousness investigates itself, the observer and the observed are aspects of the same phenomenon. This creates what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. How can subjective experience be studied objectively? Traditional scientific methodology assumes a clear separation between the investigator and the phenomenon being investigated, but consciousness research necessarily involves this boundary. Some researchers have embraced this challenge by developing what they term first-person science, or participatory research methodologies that acknowledge consciousness as both a subject and object of investigation. These approaches recognize that in studying consciousness, we might need to integrate objective measurement with careful analysis of subjective experience. Contemplative traditions have developed sophisticated methods for investigating consciousness through direct experience. Meditation, mindfulness, and other contemplative practices can be understood as research methodologies that use consciousness to investigate consciousness. The insights gained through these practices, while subjective, provide data about the nature of awareness that might be inaccessible through purely objective approaches. Modern neuroscience is beginning to integrate these first-person methodologies with objective measurement, creating hybrid approaches that honor both the subjective reality of consciousness and the need for scientific rigor. Brain imaging studies of meditation, for instance, combine precise measurements of neural activity with careful reports of subjective experience from trained contemplatives. This integration of subjective and objective methodologies might represent the beginning of a new approach to science that recognizes consciousness as both a tool for investigation and a legitimate object of study. Rather than trying to eliminate consciousness from scientific investigation, this approach seeks to understand how consciousness participates in the process of knowledge creation itself. The implications extend beyond consciousness research to questions about the nature of scientific knowledge itself. If consciousness participates in the creation of the reality it observes, as quantum mechanics seems to suggest, then science might need to evolve beyond the classical ideal of purely objective knowledge toward approaches that acknowledge the participatory role of consciousness in the creation of understanding. As we near the completion of our journey through these mysterious territories, let's explore how the heart might serve as a bridge between consciousness and the quantum realm. Recent research has revealed that the heart is far more than a mechanical pump, containing a complex neural network that processes information and communicates with the brain in ways that influence consciousness, emotion, and even cognitive function. The heart generates the strongest electromagnetic field in the body, one that can be detected several feet away and appears to carry information about emotional states. This heart field changes dynamically with different emotional states, creating coherent patterns during feelings of love, compassion, and appreciation, while becoming chaotic during stress, fear, and frustration. Some research suggests that these heart field patterns might influence not only individual physiology, but also the electromagnetic environment around a person, potentially affecting the nervous systems of nearby individuals. While the mechanisms remain unclear, studies have found correlations between heart coherence in one person and measurable physiological changes in others nearby. This research provides a potential bridge between the quantum consciousness theories we've been exploring and practical applications in daily life. If consciousness operates through quantum processes that can influence electromagnetic fields, the heart might serve as a natural interface between awareness and the subtle energies that quantum mechanics reveals underlying physical reality. Contemplative traditions have long recognized the heart as a center of consciousness and wisdom, not just emotion. Practices that cultivate heart-centered awareness often lead to experiences of expanded connection, intuitive knowing, and enhanced sensitivity to subtle aspects of reality. While these experiences are subjective, they might represent consciousness learning to work with its natural quantum properties through the heart's electromagnetic interface. The practical implications focus on cultivating heart coherence through practices like appreciation, compassion, and loving kindness. These practices appear to optimize not only cardiovascular function, but also the coherence of the heart's electromagnetic field, potentially creating conditions that support the quantum processes underlying consciousness. This heart-centered approach to consciousness development doesn't require accepting supernatural explanations, but rather recognizes the heart as a sophisticated information processing system that might naturally interface with the subtle energies and fields that quantum physics reveals underlying apparent physical reality. As you continue to rest in awareness, notice how this present moment seems to contain infinite depth and possibility. Within the simple experience of listening to these words, countless processes are occurring. Neural networks firing, quantum processes unfolding in microtubules, electromagnetic fields oscillating, and awareness itself somehow arising from this complex orchestration. Some interpretations suggest that the present moment might be where consciousness most directly interfaces with the quantum realm. Unlike memory, which deals with information about the past, or planning, which projects into the future, present moment awareness seems to participate directly in the ongoing creation of reality as it unfolds moment by moment. Quantum mechanics reveals that reality exists as probability fields that collapse into definite states through observation. While consciousness might not literally cause this collapse, the metaphor suggests that awareness participates in the selection of which possibilities become manifest in experience. The quality of attention you bring to this moment might influence which aspects of infinite possibility become real for you. This perspective transforms mindfulness and present moment awareness from simple relaxation techniques into potential methods for consciously participating in the creative processes of reality. Rather than passively observing what arises in consciousness, mindful awareness might be actively participating in the selection and manifestation of experience. Contemplative practitioners often report that sustained present moment awareness leads to experiences of time dilation, expanded perception, and access to information and insights that seem to arise from beyond ordinary thinking. While these experiences are subjective, they might represent consciousness accessing its natural quantum properties through sustained attention to the present moment. The practice of cultivating present moment awareness becomes a form of consciousness research, an exploration of how awareness participates in the ongoing creation of reality. Each moment of mindful attention becomes an experiment in consciousness, an opportunity to explore the creative, participatory nature of awareness itself. This doesn't require achieving exotic states of consciousness, but rather bringing greater sensitivity and attention to the ordinary miracle of awareness that's already present in every moment. The infinite depth and possibility that quantum mechanics reveals underlying physical reality might be directly accessible through the simple practice of mindful attention to what's actually happening now. As our exploration draws toward its completion, let's consider how the individual awakening of consciousness to its quantum nature might contribute to a larger collective transformation of human understanding. If consciousness truly operates through quantum processes that transcend individual boundaries, then the development of each person's awareness might contribute to the evolution of collective human consciousness. Some interpretations suggest that as more individuals develop their capacity to access the subtle, non-local aspects of consciousness, these developments might create what researchers term morphic resonance, or field effects that make similar developments easier for others. While this remains speculative, it offers a framework for understanding how individual consciousness development might contribute to collective human evolution. The growing interest in consciousness research, meditation, contemplative practices, and the integration of science and spirituality might represent early signs of a collective awakening to the quantum nature of awareness. Rather than being isolated individual pursuits, these explorations might be part of a larger evolutionary process that's occurring throughout human culture. This collective dimension doesn't require accepting supernatural explanations, but rather recognizes that consciousness development is inherently social and cultural. The insights and capacities that individuals develop through contemplative practice inevitably influence their interactions with others, potentially catalyzing similar developments in their families, communities, and cultures. Some researchers suggest that the current global challenges facing humanity require a corresponding evolution in consciousness, particularly the development of awareness that transcends narrow self-interest and recognizes our fundamental interconnectedness. The quantum nature of consciousness might provide a scientific framework for understanding and supporting this evolutionary development. The practical implications focus on recognizing consciousness development as both a personal and collective endeavor. Individual practices like meditation, contemplation, and mindful living become contributions to the evolution of human consciousness as a whole, while collective practices like group meditation, conscious community, and collaborative creativity become laboratories for exploring consciousness as a shared phenomenon. This perspective transforms consciousness research from an academic pursuit into a participatory exploration of human potential that could contribute to addressing the challenges and opportunities facing our species as we continue to evolve both technologically and consciously. As we begin to complete our journey through the quantum realms of consciousness, take a moment to notice how these explorations might have shifted your sense of what it means to be aware. to be conscious, to be human in a universe that reveals itself to be far stranger and more interconnected than classical science ever imagined. The theories and research we've explored together don't provide final answers, but rather open doorways into deeper questions about the nature of reality and consciousness. Whether or not consciousness literally operates through quantum processes, these investigations reveal awareness to be far more creative, participatory, and interconnected than the passive observer model suggests. The practical implications of our exploration focus not on developing supernatural abilities, but on recognizing and working with the natural capacities that consciousness already possesses. Practices like meditation, mindful attention, heart-centered awareness, and contemplative inquiry become ways of exploring consciousness as a creative, participatory process rather than methods for escaping ordinary reality. The integration of these insights into daily life doesn't require abandoning rational thinking or scientific rigor, but rather expanding our understanding of what constitutes legitimate knowledge, to include the subtle, intuitive, and creative aspects of consciousness that quantum mechanics suggests might be fundamental to reality itself. Perhaps most importantly, this exploration reveals consciousness not as an isolated individual phenomenon, but as a participatory process that connects us to each other, to the natural world, and to the creative processes that operate throughout the universe. Whether or not we ever fully understand the mechanisms underlying these connections, we can learn to work with them more consciously and skillfully. The forbidden territory we've explored together might not remain forbidden forever. As consciousness research continues to evolve, integrating rigorous scientific methodology with contemplative wisdom, we may discover that the anomalous phenomena we've discussed represent natural expressions of consciousness, operating according to principles we're only beginning to understand. The journey into the quantum nature of consciousness is ultimately a journey into the mystery of existence itself, revealing each moment of awareness as a participation in the ongoing creation of reality. As you continue to explore these possibilities in your own life, remember that consciousness itself is both the tool for investigation and the greatest mystery we seek to understand. In these final moments of our exploration, let's rest together in the awareness that some questions are more valuable for their ability to open us to wonder than for any final answers they might provide. The relationship between consciousness and quantum mechanics may never be fully resolved, but the exploration itself transforms how we experience the mystery of being aware in an aware universe. The question of whether consciousness influences reality through quantum processes might be less important than what this possibility reveals about the creative, participatory nature of awareness itself. Whether through quantum mechanisms or other processes we haven't yet discovered, consciousness appears to be far more than a passive observer of an objective world. Each moment of awareness becomes an opportunity to explore consciousness as a creative process, to investigate how the quality of attention influences the texture of experience, and to discover the subtle ways that individual awareness participates in the larger unfolding of reality. These explorations require no special beliefs or exotic practices, only a willingness to pay attention to the ordinary miracle of consciousness that's already present in every moment. The scientific investigation of consciousness and the contemplative exploration of awareness are converging toward a recognition that consciousness might be fundamental to reality rather than merely emergent from complex matter. This convergence doesn't resolve the mysteries but deepens them. revealing awareness as both the subject and object of the most profound questions about existence. As you drift into whatever follows this exploration, whether sleep, contemplation, or simply returning to ordinary activities, carry with you the recognition that consciousness itself remains the deepest mystery and the most intimate reality. Every moment of awareness is a participation in something far greater and more mysterious than we can fully comprehend. The quantum realm reveals a universe that's creative, interconnected, and fundamentally mysterious. Consciousness research suggests that awareness might participate in these same creative, interconnected, mysterious processes. The intersection of these two great frontiers of knowledge opens possibilities that could transform not only our understanding of reality, but our lived experience of what it means to be conscious beings in a conscious universe. Sweet dreams, fellow explorers of the infinite mystery of awareness. And if these explorations of consciousness and quantum mechanics have sparked your curiosity about how awareness might transcend the boundaries of waking life, I invite you to continue this journey with your dreams might be parallel universes. Are you seeing another version of yourself? Where we'll explore how the quantum principles we've discussed might manifest in the mysterious realm of sleep, revealing possibilities about the nature of dreams that could change everything you thought you knew about the nocturnal journeys of consciousness. In the quiet spaces between thoughts, something extraordinary begins to unfold. As you rest in this moment, neither fully awake nor drifting towards sleep, your consciousness exists in what some researchers describe as a liminal state, a threshold condition where the ordinary boundaries of awareness become more fluid and permeable. This twilight zone of consciousness has fascinated scientists and contemplatives alike, not because it represents an escape from reality, but because it might reveal aspects of awareness that remain hidden during our more focused, analytical states of mind. When the busy chatter of everyday thinking subsides, what emerges is a quality of presence that feels both deeply personal and mysteriously universal. Take a moment to notice the texture of your awareness right now. Without trying to analyze or categorize the experience, simply observe how consciousness seems to have a quality all its own, a kind of luminous knowing that exists independently of any particular thought or perception. This pure awareness, this sense of simply being conscious, has puzzled philosophers for millennia and continues to challenge our understanding of what mind and reality truly are. Some interpretations suggest that this fundamental awareness might operate according to principles that transcend our everyday understanding of space, time, and individual identity. While no scientific consensus exists on consciousness directly influencing quantum events, the parallels between the fluid, interconnected nature of quantum systems and the seamless, unified quality of pure awareness continue to intrigue researchers exploring the deepest foundations of both physics and consciousness. Rest for a moment in the silence between these words. Notice how this silence isn't empty, but seems to contain a fullness, a presence that supports and gives meaning to the sounds that emerge from it. This pregnant silence, this aware emptiness, offers a profound metaphor for understanding how consciousness might relate to the quantum vacuum that physicists describe as seething with potential energy and virtual particles. Just as the quantum vacuum appears empty to classical observation, but reveals itself to be full of dynamic activity when examined more closely, the silence of pure awareness initially seems like mere absence, but gradually reveals itself to be the fullest possible presence, the condition that makes all experience possible. Contemporary neuroscience has begun to map what happens in the brain during these states of spacious awareness, rather than showing decreased activity, as we might expect from states often described as empty or thoughtless. Brain imaging reveals complex patterns of neural coordination that suggest consciousness is organizing itself in fundamentally different ways during contemplative states. The default mode network, which typically maintains our sense of being a separate self moving through time, shows decreased activity, while networks associated with present moment awareness and emotional regulation become more active and coherent. This reorganization doesn't represent a diminishment of consciousness, but rather a shift toward what researchers describe as more integrated and unified modes of awareness. Some interpretations suggest that these unified states might allow consciousness to access information and connections that remain unavailable when awareness is fragmented into the usual subject-object divisions of ordinary thinking. While this remains speculative, it offers a framework for understanding why contemplative traditions have long valued states of unified awareness as sources of insight and understanding. As you continue to rest in this gentle exploration, you might notice how your sense of being a separate individual occasionally softens or becomes less defined. This isn't a loss of identity, but rather a recognition of the more fluid, interconnected nature of consciousness that usually remains in the background of experience. Modern physics has revealed that what we perceive as separate objects are actually patterns of energy and information in underlying fields that extend throughout space. The electromagnetic field, for instance, doesn't belong to any particular charged particle, but rather forms the medium through which all electromagnetic interactions occur. Similarly, some interpretations suggest that consciousness might be understood not as something that individuals possess, but as a field in which individual minds participate. This field perspective on consciousness doesn't deny individual differences or personal responsibility, but rather recognizes individuality as a localized expression of something more fundamental and universal. Just as waves on the ocean maintain their unique patterns while being expressions of the same underlying water, individual consciousnesses might maintain their distinctive qualities while participating in a more fundamental awareness field. While no scientific proof exists for such a consciousness field, the metaphor offers a useful framework for understanding experiences that contemplatives have reported throughout history, moments when the boundaries of individual awareness seem to dissolve, revealing a sense of connection and unity that feels more fundamental than our usual experience of separation. These experiences of expanded awareness often correlate with measurable changes in brain activity, heart rhythm coherence, and stress hormone levels, suggesting that whatever is happening subjectively has objective correlates that can be studied scientifically. The challenge lies in developing research methods that can investigate consciousness without losing the essential qualities that make consciousness what it is. In the gentle rhythm of your breathing, notice how each inhalation brings form, filling the lungs, expanding the chest, creating a moment of fullness. Each exhalation returns toward emptiness, releasing what was held, creating space for what's to come. This simple rhythm of form and emptiness, expansion and release, mirrors one of the most profound principles discovered in both quantum physics and contemplative traditions. Quantum mechanics reveals that particles don't have fixed independent existence, but rather arise as temporary patterns in underlying quantum fields. What we experience as solid matter is actually mostly empty space, punctuated by fleeting interactions between field excitations. The apparent solidity of your chair, your body, the ground beneath you emerges from quantum processes that are fundamentally more like music than machinery, patterns of energy and information dancing in the vast emptiness of space. This dynamic relationship between form and emptiness provides a bridge for understanding how consciousness might operate according to similar principles. Thoughts, emotions, and perceptions arise like waves in the ocean of awareness, maintaining their temporary form while being expressions of the same underlying consciousness that remains present whether mental activity is busy or quiet. Contemplative traditions have long described this recognition as liberating, not because it negates the reality of individual experience, but because it reveals experience to be more fluid and workable than we usually assume. When we recognize thoughts and emotions as temporary patterns in awareness, rather than solid facts about reality, we gain the freedom to work with them more skillfully. This perspective transforms suffering from something that happens to us into patterns that arise within the field of consciousness. Still real and requiring appropriate response, but no longer having the crushing weight of absolute reality. Pain remains pain, but the suffering that comes from resisting pain or making it mean something terrible about ourselves becomes optional. As you rest in this exploration, take a moment to practice the art of letting go, not by pushing anything away, but by allowing whatever arises in awareness to be present without grasping or rejecting it. This practice of non-attachment, central to many contemplative traditions, might represent a kind of consciousness training that aligns with the fluid, non-possessive nature of quantum reality. In quantum mechanics, the attempt to pin down particles too precisely leads to increased uncertainty in other properties. The more exactly you know a particle's position, the less you can know about its momentum. Similarly, the more tightly consciousness grasps onto any particular thought, emotion, or experience, the more it constrains its own natural flexibility and responsiveness. The practice of letting go doesn't mean becoming passive or indifferent, but rather learning to hold experience lightly, allowing consciousness to respond fluidly to whatever arises without becoming rigidly attached to particular outcomes or identities. This fluid responsiveness might represent consciousness operating more naturally, according to principles that honor both its individual expression and its participation in larger patterns of connection and change. Some research suggests that contemplative practices that emphasize letting go and present moment awareness correlate with increased psychological flexibility, improved emotional regulation, and enhanced creativity. While the mechanisms remain unclear, these practices seem to optimize consciousness in ways that allow for more adaptive and responsive engagement with life's challenges and opportunities. The quantum principle of complementarity, the idea that different aspects of reality can be true simultaneously, even if they seem contradictory, offers a useful framework for understanding letting go. You can simultaneously care deeply about outcomes while holding them lightly. Be fully engaged in life while remaining unattached to results. Maintain strong values while staying flexible about methods. In the soft space of this moment, consider how the simple act of paying attention seems to change the quality of whatever you're observing. When you focus gently on your breath, it often becomes deeper and more rhythmic. When you notice tension in your body, it frequently begins to release. When you observe your thoughts with kind awareness, they often become less compulsive and more spacious. This observation effect in consciousness parallels one of the most puzzling aspects of quantum mechanics, the measurement problem. In quantum systems, the act of observation appears to play a fundamental role in determining which of many possible outcomes becomes actual. While consciousness doesn't literally cause quantum wave function collapse in any scientifically proven sense, the parallel is intriguing and worth contemplating. Both quantum measurement and conscious observation involve a kind of selection process where multiple possibilities give way to specific actualities. In quantum mechanics, this selection appears to occur randomly within probability constraints. In consciousness, the selection often seems influenced by factors like attention, intention, and the quality of awareness we bring to experience. This parallel suggests that consciousness might naturally operate according to principles that mirror those discovered in quantum mechanics. Not because consciousness directly influences quantum events, but because both might be expressions of more fundamental principles about how reality organizes itself at the deepest levels. The practical implication focuses not on trying to manipulate reality through mental effort, but on recognizing that the quality of attention we bring to life naturally influences our experience in subtle but significant ways. Gentle, accepting awareness tends to create conditions that support healing, insight, and positive change, while anxious, controlling attention often perpetuates stress and conflict. Rest for a moment in the recognition that your consciousness doesn't exist in isolation, but is continuously interacting with the awareness of others in ways that remain largely invisible to ordinary perception. Just as ecosystems involve countless interactions between organisms that create emergent properties greater than the sum of their parts, human consciousness might participate in larger ecological patterns of awareness. Consider how your mood and energy seem to influence those around you, and how you're influenced by the emotional atmosphere of different environments. While these effects can be partially explained through conventional mechanisms like body language and pheromones, some research suggests that consciousness might communicate through more subtle channels that we're only beginning to understand. Studies of group meditation have found that when experienced practitioners meditate together, their brain waves often synchronize in ways that suggest some form of non-local connection. While the mechanisms remain unclear, these findings point toward the possibility that consciousness might be more interconnected than our usual experience of being separate individuals suggests. This interconnectedness doesn't diminish individual responsibility or uniqueness, but rather suggests that individual consciousness development naturally contributes to collective well-being. The practices that cultivate greater peace, compassion, and wisdom in individual awareness might simultaneously contribute to the overall quality of consciousness in human communities. Some interpretations suggest that this collective dimension of consciousness might help explain historical periods of rapid cultural transformation, scientific breakthroughs, and social evolution. When sufficient numbers of individuals develop more integrated and compassionate awareness, this might create field effects that support similar developments in others, though this remains a speculative idea rather than established scientific fact. As you continue to drift through this exploration, notice how the present moment seems to exist outside the usual flow of time. In states of deep presence, minutes can feel like hours, or hours can pass like moments. This flexibility of time perception offers a window into consciousness operating according to principles that transcend the linear time of clocks and calendars. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that time itself might be more fundamental than we usually assume, with past, present, and future existing simultaneously in what physicists call the block universe. While this remains a matter of scientific debate, contemplative traditions have long described experiences of consciousness that seem to transcend temporal limitations. Advanced practitioners often report accessing information about past and future events during deep meditative states, though these experiences remain subjective and difficult to verify scientifically. Rather than claiming supernatural abilities, these reports might represent consciousness accessing its natural capacity to transcend the linear time constraints that usually organize ordinary awareness. The practical value of these experiences lies not in developing psychic abilities, but in recognizing that consciousness has access to forms of knowing that extend beyond analytical thinking. Intuitive insights often seem to arrive from outside linear time, bringing together information from past experience and future possibilities in moments of understanding that feel timeless and complete. This timeless quality of insight and understanding suggests that consciousness might naturally operate according to principles that transcend the temporal sequences that organize physical processes. While we can't prove that consciousness literally transcends time, we can learn to work more skillfully with the timeless quality of awareness that's available in every present moment. Take a breath and reflect on one of the deepest paradoxes of consciousness. The more we try to control our experience through mental effort, the more elusive peace and satisfaction become. Yet when we learn to let go of control and trust the natural intelligence of awareness itself, life often becomes more harmonious and fulfilling. This paradox mirrors certain principles discovered in quantum mechanics, where attempts to measure systems too precisely inevitably disturb them, while allowing systems to evolve naturally often reveals their inherent order and beauty. The parallel suggests that consciousness might operate according to similar principles of natural intelligence that function best when not forced or manipulated. In contemplative practice, this translates into approaches that emphasize cultivation rather than control, invitation rather than force, and cooperation with consciousness rather than domination of it. Instead of trying to stop thoughts, we learn to observe them with friendly awareness. Instead of forcing emotions to change, we create space for them to transform naturally. This doesn't mean becoming passive or abandoning appropriate effort, but rather learning to apply effort in ways that support consciousness's natural capacity for healing, growth, and insight. Like a gardener who creates conditions for plants to flourish rather than trying to force growth, contemplative practice involves creating internal conditions that support the natural flowering of awareness. Some research suggests that this approach of gentle cultivation rather than forceful control correlates with better outcomes in meditation practice, psychotherapy, and personal development. The brain seems to respond more positively to kind, patient attention than to harsh, demanding effort, reorganizing itself in ways that support greater well-being and insight. As you rest in the spaciousness of this moment, imagine consciousness as having access to an infinite library where every book represents a different possible experience, insight, or way of understanding reality. In ordinary awareness, we typically read one book at a time, following linear narratives that unfold through sequential thinking and reasoning. But in states of expanded awareness, consciousness might gain access to multiple books simultaneously, allowing for the kind of holistic understanding that arrives as sudden insight or comprehensive vision. This metaphor offers a way of understanding how consciousness might access information through non-linear processes that transcend the step-by-step progression of analytical thinking. While we can't prove that consciousness literally has access to infinite information, the subjective experience of insight often feels like receiving complete understanding instantaneously rather than building it piece by piece through reasoning. These moments of direct knowing might represent consciousness operating according to its natural, holistic capacity rather than the fragmentary processes of conceptual thought. The infinite library metaphor also suggests why contemplative traditions emphasize the cultivation of spacious, receptive awareness rather than busy mental searching. When consciousness becomes quiet and open, it creates conditions that allow for the kind of spontaneous knowing that arrives as gift rather than achievement. This receptive approach to knowledge doesn't replace analytical thinking, but complements it, offering access to forms of understanding that emerge through synthesis, pattern recognition, and intuitive leaps that connect previously unrelated information in creative and meaningful ways. In the gentle quietude that surrounds these words, practice the art of deep listening. Not just to the content of what's being said, but to the silence between words, the quality of presence that pervades the entire experience, and the subtle sense of connection that arises when consciousness becomes fully receptive. This quality of deep listening extends far beyond auditory perception to encompass a way of being present that allows consciousness to receive information through multiple channels simultaneously. Body sensations, emotional resonances, intuitive insights, and environmental cues all become sources of information when awareness becomes sufficiently open and attentive. Some research suggests that experienced contemplatives develop enhanced sensitivity to subtle environmental and social cues that remain below the threshold of ordinary awareness. This enhanced sensitivity might represent consciousness learning to access information through the same subtle channels that quantum mechanics reveals underlying all physical processes. While we must be careful not to make supernatural claims, the development of subtle perception through contemplative practice appears to be a natural capacity that can be cultivated through appropriate training. The ability to sense the emotional atmosphere of environments, to pick up on unspoken communication, and to receive guidance through intuitive channels might represent consciousness operating more fully according to its natural capacities. This deep listening also extends to the internal environment of consciousness itself, developing the capacity to hear the subtle promptings of wisdom, compassion, and creative intelligence that often remain buried beneath the noise of busy thinking and emotional reactivity. As you continue to explore these ideas, consider how presence itself might be understood as a kind of technology, not in the mechanical sense of gears and circuits, but in the deeper sense of a systematic method for accomplishing specific outcomes. The technology of presence involves learning to use consciousness more skillfully to create conditions that support healing, insight, and positive transformation. Unlike external technologies that manipulate the material world through force and control, the technology of presence works through invitation, acceptance, and the cultivation of optimal internal conditions. Instead of forcing change through willpower, presence creates space for natural healing and growth processes to unfold. This internal technology appears to operate according to principles that mirror those discovered in quantum mechanics and complex systems theory. Small changes in the quality of attention can cascade into large changes in overall well-being. Gentle, sustained awareness can catalyze transformations that forceful effort cannot achieve. Letting go of control often leads to more effective outcomes than trying to micromanage every detail. Contemporary neuroscience is beginning to map how contemplative practices literally rewire the brain in ways that support greater emotional regulation, cognitive flexibility, and social connection. These changes suggest that presence practices might represent sophisticated methods for optimizing consciousness that have been refined through thousands of years of experiential research. The technology of presence also appears to be inherently relational, working not just within individual consciousness, but in the spaces between people. The quality of presence that one person brings to a relationship or situation seems to influence the overall field of awareness in ways that support healing and positive change for everyone involved. Rest for a moment in the image of consciousness as a garden where thoughts, emotions, and experiences grow according to the quality of attention and care we provide. Just as a skilled gardener works with natural processes rather than against them, contemplative practice involves learning to tend the garden of consciousness in ways that support the flourishing of wisdom, compassion, and peace. This gardening metaphor offers a middle way between the extremes of trying to control consciousness through force and simply letting everything run wild without any cultivation. Like any garden, consciousness benefits from appropriate tending, weeding out harmful patterns, watering beneficial qualities, and creating conditions that support healthy growth. The parallel with quantum mechanics appears in how small, consistent changes in the quality of attention can lead to large transformations in overall consciousness, much like how quantum effects can cascade into macroscopic changes. The gentle persistence required for both gardening and contemplative practice reflects how natural systems respond better to consistent, patient cultivation than to sporadic, intense effort. Some research suggests that contemplative practices that emphasize gentle cultivation rather than forceful suppression of unwanted mental states correlate with better long-term outcomes in terms of psychological well-being, emotional stability, and spiritual development. The brain appears to reorganize more effectively when change is invited rather than forced. This approach to consciousness cultivation also recognizes that different qualities need to be nurtured at different times, just as gardens require different care throughout the seasons. Sometimes consciousness needs the spacious rest of winter, sometimes the active growth of spring, sometimes the full flowering of summer, and sometimes the letting go and harvesting wisdom of autumn. As you breathe gently into this moment, bring your attention to the area around your heart and notice how this simple shift in focus seems to change the quality of your entire experience. The heart, in both scientific research and contemplative traditions, appears to serve as a unique interface between individual consciousness and the larger field of awareness that connects all beings. Recent research has revealed that the heart contains a sophisticated neural network that processes emotional and social information independently of the brain. The heart's electromagnetic field is the strongest in the body and appears to carry information about emotional states that can be detected by sensitive individuals several feet away. Some interpretations suggest that the heart might serve as a natural antenna for the subtle information fields that quantum mechanics reveals underlying physical reality. While this remains speculative, the consistent reports across cultures and traditions of the heart as a center of intuitive knowing and connection point toward capacities that we're only beginning to understand scientifically. Contemplative practices that focus on cultivating heart-centered awareness often lead to experiences of expanded connection, enhanced intuition, and access to what practitioners describe as universal love or compassion. While these experiences are subjective, they correlate with measurable changes in heart rhythm, variability, stress hormone levels, and immune function. The holographic principle in physics suggests that every part of a hologram contains information about the whole. Similarly, some interpretations propose that the heart might serve as a holographic access point to the larger field of consciousness, allowing individual awareness to connect with universal patterns of wisdom and compassion that transcend personal limitations. In the gentle flow of this exploration, embrace the uncertainty that pervades both quantum mechanics and consciousness research. Rather than seeing uncertainty as a limitation or failure, consider how it might be an essential feature of a reality that remains creatively open to new possibilities and transformations. Quantum mechanics reveals that uncertainty isn't just a temporary limitation of our knowledge, but appears to be built into the fundamental structure of reality. The universe doesn't seem to be a deterministic machine running according to fixed laws, but rather a creative process that remains open to genuinely new possibilities at every moment. Similarly, consciousness appears to operate according to principles of openness and uncertainty that resist reduction to mechanical explanation. The subjective experience of consciousness, what it feels like to be aware, remains mysterious despite centuries of philosophical investigation and decades of neuroscientific research. This uncertainty in consciousness research isn't a bug but a feature, pointing toward the possibility that consciousness might be fundamentally creative and open rather than mechanically determined. The experience of free will, of being able to choose between genuine alternatives, might reflect consciousness participating in the same creative uncertainty that quantum mechanics reveals at the foundation of physical reality. Learning to dance with uncertainty rather than demanding premature closure becomes a crucial skill for both scientific investigation and contemplative practice. The willingness to remain open to possibilities that we haven't yet imagined might be essential for continued discovery and growth in both domains. As you rest in the deepening quiet of this moment, notice how stillness isn't empty but full, pregnant with potential, alive with subtle movement, rich with presence. This dynamic stillness offers a profound metaphor for understanding how consciousness might interface with the quantum vacuum that physicists describe as seething with virtual particles and zero-point energy. Just as the quantum vacuum appears empty to classical observation, but reveals extraordinary activity when examined more closely, the stillness of deep contemplative states initially seems like mere absence, but gradually reveals itself to be the fullest possible presence, the source from which all experience arises and to which it returns. This recognition transforms our relationship with silence, boredom, and empty spaces from something to be avoided or filled with distraction into something to be explored and appreciated as the creative source of all activity. In stillness, consciousness touches its own source and discovers the inexhaustible creativity that underlies all mental activity. Some research suggests that the brain activity during deep contemplative states shows increased coherence and integration rather than simply decreased activity. These states might represent consciousness organizing itself according to more fundamental principles of harmony and wholeness that usually remain hidden beneath the fragmentation of ordinary thinking. The practical implication involves learning to appreciate and cultivate stillness, not as escape from life, but as touching the source of life itself. In stillness, consciousness can regenerate, reorganize, and access to creative intelligence that supports effective action in the world. As our exploration continues to unfold, consider how the recognition of consciousness as fundamentally interconnected and participatory naturally gives rise to ethical considerations about how we use awareness and what responsibilities this might entail. If consciousness operates through quantum-like processes that transcend individual boundaries, then the quality of awareness we cultivate doesn't remain purely private, but influences the larger field of consciousness in which all beings participate. This doesn't require accepting supernatural explanations, but simply recognizing that consciousness appears to be more interconnected and influential than purely materialist models suggest. The development of greater peace, compassion, and wisdom in individual consciousness might therefore be understood not just as personal development, but as a contribution to collective well-being. Contemplative practices become forms of service that benefit not only the practitioner, but the larger community of consciousness. This perspective naturally leads to what contemplative traditions call bodhisattva ethics, the recognition that individual awakening and collective awakening are inseparable. The development of consciousness becomes motivated not by personal gain, but by the desire to contribute to the flourishing of all beings. While these ethical considerations go beyond what science can directly verify, they represent natural responses to the recognition of consciousness as participatory and interconnected. The more clearly we see our fundamental connection with others, the more naturally compassionate and skillful our actions become. As we approach the completion of our journey together, let's look toward the horizons that consciousness research might reveal in the coming years and decades. The intersection of neuroscience, quantum physics, contemplative wisdom, and emerging technologies promises discoveries that could transform our understanding of what consciousness is and what it might become. Emerging technologies like quantum sensors and brain-computer interfaces might eventually allow us to detect and measure the subtle quantum processes that some theories suggest underlie consciousness. While such technologies remain experimental, they point toward possibilities for investigating consciousness that go far beyond current capabilities. The integration of artificial intelligence with consciousness research might reveal new insights about the nature of awareness by creating systems that mirror certain aspects of consciousness while lacking others. The comparison between biological and artificial forms of information processing could illuminate what makes consciousness unique. Perhaps most importantly, the growing dialogue between scientific and contemplative approaches to consciousness might lead to new methodologies that honour both objective measurement and subjective experience. These integrated approaches could reveal aspects of consciousness that remain invisible when studied from only one perspective. The practical applications of consciousness research might include new approaches to education that work with consciousness's natural learning processes, therapeutic modalities that address awareness at multiple levels, and technologies that support the development of human potential rather than replacing human capabilities. Take a breath and notice how this moment contains within it the seeds of countless possible futures. In the gentle space between what is and what might be, consciousness continues its eternal exploration of its own nature, guided by both ancient wisdom and emerging science that reveals new mysteries with every discovery. As we drift toward the completion of our journey through the quantum realms of awareness, let's rest together in the recognition that consciousness research stands at a threshold. The next decades may witness discoveries that transform our understanding not just of what awareness is, but of what it might become as human beings learn to work more skillfully with the subtle processes that govern the mind. Emerging technologies offer unprecedented tools for investigating the delicate relationship between consciousness and the quantum realm. Quantum sensors capable of detecting magnetic fields at the scale of individual neurons may soon reveal whether the microtubules that Penrose and Hameroff proposed as quantum computers actually maintain coherence in living brain tissue. While these investigations remain in their infancy, they represent the first serious attempts to bridge the gap between theoretical speculation and measurable evidence. The development of brain-computer interfaces based on quantum sensing technologies might eventually allow researchers to monitor the subtle electromagnetic and quantum processes that some theories suggest underlie consciousness. These tools could reveal whether contemplative practices actually influence quantum processes in neural tissue, or whether the parallels between meditation and quantum phenomena remain purely metaphorical. Some interpretations suggest that these technological advances might eventually lead to devices that can enhance or support the natural quantum processes underlying awareness, though this remains highly speculative. Rather than replacing human consciousness, such technologies might learn to work with consciousness's natural capacities, supporting the development of states of awareness that integrate rational thinking with intuitive wisdom. The integration of artificial intelligence with consciousness research presents both opportunities and challenges for understanding the nature of awareness. As AI systems become more sophisticated, the comparison between artificial and biological information processing might illuminate what makes consciousness unique. The qualities that remain irreducibly subjective and experiential might point toward aspects of awareness that transcend computational processing. As we draw near the end of our exploration through the quantum realms of consciousness, we find ourselves standing at the edge of a mystery that may never be fully resolved. And perhaps that's exactly as it should be. The question we began with, whether consciousness and quantum mechanics dance together in ways that could rewrite our understanding of reality, remains beautifully, provocatively open. What we've discovered together isn't a collection of definitive answers, but rather a new way of asking questions. From the CIA's remote viewing experiments to the latest research on quantum processes in neural tissue, from the holographic universe to the architecture of awareness itself, we've traced the contours of a frontier where science meets the deepest mysteries of what it means to be conscious in a quantum universe. The theories we've explored, while still emerging and often controversial, point toward possibilities that could transform not just how we understand consciousness, but how we experience our own awareness. Whether or not the mind operates through literal quantum processes, these investigations reveal consciousness to be far more creative, interconnected, and participatory than classical science ever imagined. Perhaps the most profound insight from our journey is this: the very act of exploring these questions changes us. In contemplating how consciousness might transcend the boundaries of space and time, we begin to experience our own awareness as something more fluid, more connected, more mysterious than we ever dared imagine. The forbidden territory we've wandered together may not remain forbidden forever. As consciousness research continues to evolve, integrating rigorous scientific methodology with contemplative wisdom, we may discover that phenomena once dismissed as impossible are actually natural expressions of consciousness operating.